Welcome to Taskforce Geek. My name is Dirk Cooper, and I'm joined today by Scott.
Howdy.
And Shawn.
Hello.
And our special guest is Steve Resk.
How you doing?
Steve is the CEO of SRG Universe, which created the Supershow, a dice-based card game that brings you inside the ring where underground competitors compete for wrestling immortality. And we'll talk more about that soon. All of the stories or questions were shared on the Task Force Geek Quora space. Let's see if I can get that up there. There it is. You can follow the space in the future to see what we're going to be talking about on the show. If you want to be a guest on Task Force Geek, I'll tell you how to do that at the end. We are broadcasting live on my, here it is. We are broadcasting live on my Facebook page, which is right there, or you can watch that on our ridiculous YouTube channel, which is that right there. And by the way, if you want to solve that ridiculous link right there, it's a 3-step process. The first step is go to YouTube. The second step is look for Geek. And the third is subscribe, please. We get 100 subscribers. We can change that. All right. We haven't even started this thing, and Walt is already chiming in, guys.
Well, Walt is a big fan of the show, probably because he's been on the show. So there you go.
People who are on the show are great fans. All right. So up first is a story about, let's see, let me get this. Oh my gosh, I am so uncoordinated today. Here it is. The Mandalorian. Olyphant, Timothy Olyphant is going to be on the Mandalorian. His casting was announced a week after The Mandalorian rocked the internet when reports surfaced that Temuera Morrison, who played Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones, would appear as legendary bounty hunter Boba Fett in the Disney Plus show's sophomore season. Boba Fett isn't the only fan favorite who will reportedly appear in The Mandalorian, as Rosario Dawson is also going to reportedly guest star as the beloved ex-Jedi Ahsoka Tano in season 2. I'm going to go to Shawn Wilson first on this subject.
What is your question?
Yeah, what do you
Am
think?
I excited about this? Heck yeah, I love Timothy Olyphant.
I mean, you talk about that dude all the time.
I dig him. I dig the heck out of that guy. I'd seen him in on HBO whenever he was in the show Deadwood, and obviously, other movies since then and whatnot. But what really solidified him for me was the series Justified. He was absolutely fantastic. I love that show. Had to buy a special edition box set of that show. That guy's just fantastic to me.
All right.
Super.
Is that it? That's what you got, man?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I don't recall watching too much of Timothy Olyphant, so this news doesn't sway me one way or another. I know one day I will sit down on my couch and just take in The Mandalorian. I think what I do like about this is how so many people are excited how they're casting new roles and new characters, and they're getting these big name actors. I mean, I know the guy's big, but just because I don't watch everything with him doesn't mean I don't know that. So I just think it's really cool. I even heard something like they're trying to get what's the guy who played Machete? They're trying to get him,
Danny Trejo?
That's what I read something about that a couple of days ago. I don't know if that's just true, or if that's fans just being excited and hoping. But I think it's really cool that in one way, because we're branching out from the core Star Wars universe, which we've been wanting for years in some type of film sense, or a TV show. So we're getting that. And obviously it's popular. So any of these characters at any time could spin off into their own thing. I mean, so sure, let's do it. Let's keep going.
Steve, what do you think?
Before this year, I had never watched any Star Wars in official capacity. And
oh my gosh, Steve.
Yeah, no, for real. And I had watched the newest films, and I enjoyed them, and people said that's not really what Star Wars.
How old are you, Steve?
About. I'm 31. So I'm one of
so
the few minority. But I will say that I did watch The Mandalorian from start to finish, and I absolutely loved it, and kind of made me order Disney Plus and kind of to try to dive into some Star Wars. And I watched episode 1 to me, which is episode 1, where everybody tells you to start recently, and I loved it. So when I first saw The Mandalorian, I had only known about Boba Fett. So I'm like, that's what Boba Fett was? He was a Mandalorian? I never really would put 2 and 2 together as somebody who just only knew Star Wars from what they saw in passing or board games or video games of things like that. So for Boba Fett to be tied into the story for somebody like me, that was exciting because that's like the one Mandalorian that I knew before going into the storyline, and Jango as well. But Boba was like my favorite character because that was pretty much one of the only people I really knew who he was. But start to finish, I love The Mandalorian. And I won't miss season 2 at all. So, any sort of additions, especially something that I'm familiar with in the Star Wars universe, which is kind of tough, is something I'm going to look forward to for sure. Scott, if you didn't see The Mandalorian, I don't know what you're doing, man. I haven't seen any Star Wars that I've seen it.
Well, I don't have my own pro wrestling card game empire like you do. You're sitting on that big buck money, and some of us are just working men. You
could tell, right in Grandma's basement.
Well, one day, Steve doesn't know me like Shawn and Dirk do, but you have to almost tie me down to make me sit at home and watch TV. I waste my time in other ways. It's not like I'm outside fixing things. I'm definitely wasting time, but I get stir crazy sitting down. So,
and I feel you on that. My wife and I, we don't watch too much TV unless it's something like a sitcom we've watched over and over to go to sleep with. But I got into The Mandalorian because my parents had it at their house, and we would go there like every Monday to eat dinner. So my routine became like, I'm going to eat dinner, then watch Mandalorian for an hour and go home. And then I started looking forward to Monday night family dinners all of a sudden to go catch up on the next episode of The Mandalorian.
That's cool.
So I watched it weekly, and it was excellent.
That's awesome, man. That's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Walt says, don't forget that Katie Sackhoff will be playing her Mandalorian character from Clone Wars.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
So that's another thing. And in addition to that, there's some rumors that the Ahsoka Tano character is going to roll off into her own series.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. I think we're finally going to get infinite Star Wars stuff, maybe in the form of Disney Plus for the rest of our lives. And that's okay because that universe is big. As long as you put good people on it and tell good stories, as long as we don't get a Droids cartoon or an Ewoks cartoon,
oh yeah,
I think we're going to be okay.
We've done that.
Yeah.
We've done that. We've covered that area. I think that the future of Star Wars is on television. I mean, they have the right people in charge of this stuff. They're telling really great stories. The production value is exceptionally high, I think. They're definitely taking some chances where they might not with the movies. And lately, the movies have been a little disappointing. So I think that Timothy Olyphant is cool. I think Ahsoka Tano being in the series is cool. It seems like what they're doing is just kind of, knocking down all the stops to give us something that's going to be really interesting. So I'm pretty excited about what they're doing.
Agreed.
This Star Wars fan is excited. All right. Well, then let's go to the next issue, which is a new Star Trek series. CBS revealed Friday that it had given a series order to Star Trek Strange New Worlds, a new show that will take place on the Starship Enterprise in the years prior to James T. Kirk coming aboard as captain. The new show is set, like other recent Star Trek spinoffs, to stream on CBS All Access. I've already bitched about that. But it will, according to co-creator and executive producer Akiva Goldsman, hew more closely to the original Kirk-era Star Trek in structure and tone than those other recent additions to the franchise have. So first up, I'm going to go to Scott.
Hey, I haven't watched the Discovery stuff because I don't want to subscribe to all these channels, but I'm interested. I mean, if you're our age and you've been a sci-fi fan, whether it was Star Trek or Star Wars, you were always interested in both. I mean, most people were, at least. And it wasn't until the new Star Trek that came out with Chris Pine and stuff in it, did Star Trek fans finally have a movie that you could compare to Star Wars. You could say, like, this movie is great, and in some ways might be better than some Star Wars films. And Star Trek fans always had good films, but they didn't have great films.
Right.
And I think we finally got that, and I don't think any of us, I'm not one big on like, let's retcon with a timeline story. Cause I think that's been, as a guy who's read comics for 30 years, we've seen that many, many, many times. But it was done well. And if we're going to go ahead and restart everything, let's just tell different stories from different timelines. And this actually excites me more than the Discovery things, because as a child, when I watched those old episodes of Captain Pike, I wondered, like, how the hell did we get from, point A to now his point B? Because this guy must have been an awesome captain at some point before all this stuff happened. So this actually kind of excites me. It's like, it's a story that we should be, told what happened. And, there's also no reason not to have a Star Trek series all the time. What happened within the last couple of years that they finally decided to like care about Star Trek again on TV? I mean, I don't know, but
they're doing their best to get you on that CBS All Access. That's what's happening.
And that might be the downfall. I mean, I don't, as a single dad, I don't know if I'm going to be like going to subscribe to all these networks, but I am definitely very interested in this enough to maybe even look into it and maybe soak it in for 1 month and then cancel. So they might get my $10 at some point.
Hey, you get a month for free. So, and you've only got about 30 hours of programming right now.
Well, that might as well be 7 years for me. So I don't know if I can do that.
All right. Well, even then, it is only $5.99 a month. It's not terrible. It's not.
Okay.
Enormous. So you could definitely do it in a couple of months. I figured you've only got one season of Star Trek Picard and 2 of Star Trek Discovery so far. So, it's not that much.
I mean, the problem to me with if you continue the Star Trek stuff after the Next Generation, it got so sci-fi where like, I think going back in the reset kind of lets us have more stories to tell in some ways. I mean,
right. Steve, I'm going to you next.
Man, I'm not going to have a lot to say on this subject because it took me 31 years to watch Star Wars. I have not even scratched the surface on Star Trek, unfortunately. I'm definitely intrigued because when you haven't seen either of them, you kind of assume they're both the same thing. And I'm sure that they're wildly different. So I'd like to see, how Star Wars' take on the future and the galaxy and the universe is different from Star Trek and dive in. The only thing Star Trek related that I'm remotely familiar with is Seth MacFarlane put out a movie where there was like you could like vote on liking people, and you guys probably know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't remember all the details of it.
Was it the show The Orville?
Orville, right? And my friend was giving me like a really long rundown at Dragon Con about this because they were in the cosplay, and I was like, I've never seen Star Trek, but I definitely might start with something like that. So sorry, I can't bring much of the future of Star Trek conversation.
I think you did pretty good for not saying it.
Yeah, the Orville is basically watching Star Trek: The Next Generation just 30 years later. So you're okay watching the Orville, and I just accept that it's kind of in the Star Trek universe, even though it's not.
Right, not unofficially.
Yeah, exactly. Has a little bit more comedy to it.
Yeah, we said we'd get off on some tangents, but basically like the premise of that is after I left this show, I could give you like an upvote on the way out, right? And that kind of affected your social status.
Yeah, they ran across some aliens who basically it was like everything in the world was based off almost like a Facebook thing. So like if I threw some trash on the ground and somebody recorded it, if it got enough upvotes, basically I'd get executed or thrown in jail or whatever. And I had to like convince enough people of the population that I'm really am sorry and stuff like that. So it was a unique take. And I think it was kind of a social commentary on how meaner people can be on the internet versus in real life.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool to check out. So
that was just
Star
one
Trek
episode.
And I ended up on Orville.
There you go. That's all right. That's the way we do it here. Shawn, what do you think?
One of the bringing up the Orville, one of the things that I had read when that series first started was that this was the best interpretation of Star Trek that there has ever been. And the first season, I have to agree. Yes, it had a lot of comedy. It had a lot of Seth MacFarlane-ness to it, but it was a fantastic interpretation of Star Trek. Now, with the Star Trek series itself, my dad watched Star Trek all the time, and of course, he didn't like watching TV alone. So when I came along, I had to sit down and watch it with him.
Same here, buddy.
Yeah. So that was my initiation into the Star Trek world, and of course, I've been watching science fiction ever since. The new series, I haven't watched any of them. I'm boycotting all of these little tangent channels that keep popping up. It's annoying to me, which is kind of ironic, being that I've asked for years. I've asked for kind of a cafeteria style cable,
right?
And now I have it, and I don't want it. But anyway,
cutting that cord is costing more than you thought.
Exactly. But the series, they look great. I am really interested to see what they do with Pike. He was by far, I think, one of the more interesting characters, being that he only had, I think, 2 episodes in the original series. And it's amazing that he was so interesting just having 2 episodes.
Right.
So I'm really curious to see how they play him in his own series, and I'm really looking forward to at least reading about what they do with the show.
All right. Well, I'm the only person here who's seen the new Star Trek stuff, so I guess I'm going to have to pull this up here on my own. Discovery is a series that kind of started out slow, I think, in the first season. The second season, they introduced this Captain Pike character, who took over as the captain of the Discovery, but he came over from the Enterprise. And so what they did is they introduced some of those characters from that first incarnation of Star Trek, which is a woman that he refers to as Number One, who is his first officer, and then also Spock, who was on the original incarnation of the Enterprise. Both of those characters, Number One and Spock, are awesome and have very little to do, unfortunately, in the new Discovery series. But Pike was front and center during this thing. And as Walt here says, maybe the best captain ever. Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. I've
heard that from a lot of places.
Kind of a hotshot sort of character, but also listened to his crew. Every decision he made was right on target. It's like, if I was going to have a captain, if I was going to be a red shirt on any starship, I think I'd want Captain Pike to be in charge of this thing. He seems like the most reasonable, kind of egoless captain in the group. And he's also kind of interesting, kind of a little bit of a cowboy sort. So that combination is pretty cool. I love the new Spock. So putting all of those together on a new series could actually be the best thing that they've done recently. I really like the Picard series as well. They dealt with a lot of artificial intelligence subjects, all crammed into the deal. I liked the storyline and kind of how they resolved it. So, I like what they did with Picard also. So anyway, I guess all that to say, I don't know if they're producing enough content to justify getting CBS All Access, but if you can watch about 30, 40 hours of content, you can get it for free and see what you think before you pay the $5.99 per month.
So really, this Captain Pike stuff is a spinoff?
It's a spinoff of Discovery. I guess this is a spoiler alert. The Discovery crew is now in the future, in the far future. And but they left behind Pike and Spock and the Enterprise crew. So what we're going to get is apparently kind of a series that's episodic, which means instead of having an overarching storyline that runs through 14 episodes or something, you're going to have a new episode each time, kind of like the old series.
Interesting.
So, it allows you to kind of get on board, and all of these characters are really good. So anyway, I'm pretty excited about what they're doing there.
All right, maybe you should send me that code over, buddy, and I can get on your CBS.
I will.
You can help a brother out.
I'll hook you up, buddy. All right. Our next subject is Steve Resk and the Super Show. So there's that. And what we want to do is just throw it right straight to Steve and say, let's talk about Super Show. What is it, and how did you get started with it?
So Super Show is the #1 wrestling game in the world where you can live all your wildest wrestling fantasies without ever taking a chair shot. So it is a tabletop dice and card game that is on about its 6th year since inception. And in the past few years, I'd say the game has kind of evolved to where it was always intended to be, with a lot of competitors that you could choose from and a vast card pool that you could choose from. So basically, this game was designed to emulate wrestling and what it feels like to be a wrestler. And I had played other games growing up as a kid. Namely, one of them was called WWE Raw Deal, which was one of my favorite games. However, I felt like that game over time didn't actually feel like having a wrestling match. So I had set on the course to do a game development, working with some other projects. And we had pitched those to another company, Topps, actually, one of the bigger companies. And Topps had suggested making a wrestling game. And I actually started off with a board game. And when I was pitching it to Topps, they were like, what about the classic model? And, I never really thought about doing a wrestling card game because I had played Raw Deal my whole life. And that was kind of the wrestling card game growing up. So when I kind of came to the terms that game had been out of print for so long, it would be appropriate for like a new game to come into play. I set my sights on that, and I came up with a concept that really tried to reflect, the values that I liked in a game, something that was easy to get into, easy to learn, something you could share with people, and most importantly, can make you get immersed in this world of, in this case, wrestling. And it started off as a big hit. I took it to Gen Con with some cutouts that started off on just, from pencil and pieces of paper to an Excel spreadsheet to starting to color it. And I brought a demo one year. And then the following year, I bought, more or less a finished product that was in a Chinese food container from not having boxes, and had some handmade sticker dice that Scott probably might have some at home still. And everything was printed in a local print shop. So the card quality wasn't great, but it worked. And people really liked this game. And, some people suggested Kickstarter, and maybe 6 years ago, we did our first Kickstarter, and it was about 8,000 or 9,000 that we raised. And to me, that was the most amount of money I've ever seen. I thought it was the biggest success possible. And each year we've been able to run that and grow the community. And the community is, while it's always been the vision to have a game that a community can develop around, it's kind of taken a life on its own. Scott could tell you a little bit about it, and we could bounce some questions back and forth, because the story is so long at this point. It's almost like, well, what's the relevant points to start, or where are we at now?
That's perfect. Yeah, let's throw it to Scott. What do you think, man?
All right. So I think I was introduced to Super Show right after your first Kickstarter, Steve. And as a guy who, I don't know if you guys remember it, Shawn and Dirk might be a little bit too old, but when I was a child, there was some,
what?
You might be too old to remember.
Mother.
Well, you're older than me. Did y'all play with Muscle Men? Do you remember those?
Of course.
Okay.
What?
Did Dirk?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if y'all had those. Okay. So in the mid 80s, this is where my love.
We're not that much older, dude.
So my love for pro wrestling came from Sunday morning. I think it started at 9:00. Mid-South Wrestling came on.
Mid-South.
Mid-South Wrestling here in Oklahoma came on at 9:00.
Right.
And at this point, my family was going to church, and I would try to ditch church so I could watch pro wrestling. The earliest people I remember loving is Mr. Wrestling 2 as a child. And at the time him and Magnum TA were a tag team, and then they got beat down, I think, by the Midnight Express eventually. And Mr. Wrestling 2 turned heel and became Mr. Wrestling. And then he introduced a new Mr. Wrestling 2 that was a giant that later went on to be Hercules Hernandez in the WWF. At the time of my childhood, these little pink things came out that were random, and they were called Muscle Men, and they stood for millions of unusual small creatures looking everywhere. But over in Japan, they were called Kinnikuman, which was a story about,
I thought he was about to lay some Japanese on us right there.
Yeah, exactly. I've never read the original manga because it's never been translated to my knowledge. But years ago, they came out with Kinnikuman 2, or Ultimate Muscle is what it's called here, which is his son. And it was like 30 volumes of manga, which were really good. But, it's pro wrestling. So as a child, I just fell in love with pro wrestling. I remember being really mad at my father. Like as a child, you watch wrestling, and he wanted to make sure like I didn't believe it, so I wouldn't go try moves on my sister. But at the same time, I wanted to believe it. Like I would watch matches and go like, that didn't look right. How did that guy fall? And all this stuff. But I remember one day my dad came down to the den and said, that SHIT ain't real, right? And I was like, how dare he? And I continued to believe for a few weeks. And the more and more I thought about it, the more I saw like, this is orchestrated. And then I realized,
wait a minute. I have to stop you right there.
Why?
Say that again. You said your dad said something to you.
He said, this SHIT is not real. I'm trying not to cuss on here. and
can I say that my dad said the exact same thing to me?
Well, they're probably trying to protect us because we were little boys who probably would go over to the neighbor's house and try to suplex them or brainbuster somebody on the floor.
Tell your teacher to just bring it, thinking like that's the appropriate response.
So
that's so funny.
For weeks, I didn't want to believe it. Like my dad's wrong. This is real. It has to be. These guys hate each other. And I know this is a long story to get to Supershow, but
we got time, buddy.
I remember finally one day I was a young boy and I decided like, well, you know what? I like Star Wars. That crap ain't real either.
Right.
I'm just going to like this. And if people don't, who cares? Who cares? My mom watches soap operas. Those people aren't really sleeping with each other and doing this and that, or killing each other all the time. So I fell in love with pro wrestling and I've loved it ever since. There's times in my life where I've faded out of pro wrestling and faded back in. But when it's good, I love it. I love the idea behind it. I love watching the crowd. I love the behind the scenes stuff, like everybody thinks it'd be really easy to manage a company and all this, but you're dealing with humans who have egos. So all that stuff is really interesting to me.
That's so true.
Then we found this game, and it was the guys from the Slurpcast podcast that got it kind of us into it. And so we played these at Blood Bowl tournaments. And then when the Kickstarter came around, they had a thing where you could make up your own character. It was like a bonus thing. And I'm sure Steve's probably thinking when he started this was like, well, people want their own character, but I doubt anybody's going to pay X amount of money for their character. And then they probably all sold out, and he probably looked at himself going, holy crap, I got something going on here. It's a very unique game because if you have the patience and you really want to get your character into the game, which is the funnest thing. I'm going to put this up here. See if I can get it to focus.
Yeah, I got it.
There we go, right there. So that's when Scott Prime was born. I was doing a podcast. I had a character in mind, Dirk might remember our extremely fat wrestling that we had back in college.
I do remember that well.
And I was first going to make Fat Finley up as a character, but instead I made Scott Prime up. And the joy of this game is really, it is as simple as you want it to be and as complex as you want it to be. If you're one of those guys who like play Magic the Gathering and you want to deck build and craft and try to do things, but if you just want to sit down and play a game with dice, it is so easy it's so easy to learn. I know my girlfriend loved the game. She played the game. She had a character in the game. It's just easy and simple to learn. Anybody can pick it up. My children have played in tournaments. They're not big pro wrestling fans, so they're okay with it. But anybody, if you like wrestling and you like to play any type of game, you can sit down and play a game. So it's a great concept. I love it. I probably don't love it as much as I know there's I'm a super fan. There's mega super duper crazy rabid fans out there of Supershow that I think if Steve sneezed in a tissue and then put it on a card, those guys might buy it.
Maybe not in this environment, but a couple months ago, maybe.
But Steve, you have rabid fans, right?
We do have, I have a ton of fans, and I'm very grateful for that. I always say that I try to answer all my messages that I get, and some days it's all day long. I just know what my life was like before Supershow and SRG Universe, so I try to always, even though as things continually grow, just to remember that if you don't appreciate your fans and the people that supported you and helped you get you there, what my life could revert to, so. We do have a lot of fans, and I feel really fortunate to have a bunch of them. But I think, Scott, you really touched upon a lot of the things that, were what Supershow was all about. Number one, I loved wrestling as a kid, and my childhood memories, besides other games, a lot of it was playing with action figures, whether they were Marvel or wrestling. Everybody was in a wrestling match. You had back in the day, you had those stuffed $1 Million Man and Hulk Hogan little wrestling buddies, so I would go 2 out of 3 falls with them on my brother's bed when I was younger and all that stuff. So growing up, I felt like you wanted to be a superhero or a wrestler. And this game has really let me become a wrestler. And because it's a fantasy game, it kind of is taking on that science fiction aspect of it as well. As the game grew and the community grew, we started getting more and more things. Your character was a very old school veteran wrestler. We call him the hardest working man in the LFF because he's on card art everywhere. But now we have people with robot arms and flaming fists and shooting rainbows out, or aliens and things like that. So it's really been a fun and exciting ride to watch basically a wrestling federation unfold from this. Now we have title belts, and as you said before, the backstage area. My responsibilities are not only shipping and in the warehouse and game development, but managing a legitimate wrestling company where nobody actually fights, where they settle it on the table with cards and dice, and people have egos when it comes to title matches and number one contenderships and events. So that's pretty exciting that I'm actually in control of a global wrestling federation, and they have their own branches Slurp Class. They started up the XCW, which was a big branch of about 30 players out of the Chicago area, and now that's one of many, which is pretty exciting.
Right. I know here in Oklahoma we have the WCCW, which is a play off the old World Class Championship Wrestling when I was a kid, but we play at Wizards Asylum down in Norman. So it's Wizards Championship Card Wrestling. So we get a play off that, and we have our own fed too. Those are scattered amongst everywhere in the United States and probably across the sea. What I think is great is not only if you wanted to, you could make your own character, but there's well over 200 characters. I know this because I have at least 200 characters. So they're out there, and I don't have them all. And what we haven't talked about, it's just not me making up my character or other people making up their, some people have a character that this is me, how I look today. I want to be in this game. And then there's other people like me who I take the approach of if at 18 I decided to become a pro wrestler, this is where I would be today. It's Scott Prime in a parallel universe, where I actually worked out instead of eating a lot with my friends in college, and I went to pro wrestling school. But what Steve hasn't mentioned yet is there is tons of independent real life wrestlers in this game. I mean, I missed out on the opportunity, but Steve has signed Sabu before.
Oh, wow.
John Morrison, Johnny Superstar, Johnny Super Show, I think is what he's in the game. Steve has real competitors in real life on here. And I don't know what the deal is, or, that's all behind the scenes stuff for Steve to, if he wants to even talk about, or maybe he has limited print runs. I don't know, but I know I'm one of the few that's blessed to have an AJ style card before he went to WWE. And it's crazy
right now in my inbox yesterday were $550 if I had one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And there's collectors of this game. So I have that in my back pocket, knowing like, if I really, really need money one day, hopefully I could sell my AJ Styles card if I wanted to for a couple $100, and I bought it for way less, so it's a pretty awesome deal.
When we started on this, we actually tried to pitch it as a WWE branding game, and I had everything laid out and it looked amazing, and the companies basically promised you deals and, oh, don't worry, you'll be happy with what you get. And I was basically getting dragged along for months and months, and Gen Con was approaching, and I had made the decision that I wasn't going into Gen Con empty-handed. And at that point, I created my 4 original characters. It was El Super Hombre and Snake Pit and the Big Shot and the Rising Sun. And that was when we decided that this didn't need to be a WWE brand, that we could make up our own characters. And then the reception, as Scott mentioned before, with people being able to create themselves in Kickstarter, it really took off. And I said in the early stages that Pokemon had 150 characters, and I think that we can get to 150, and now we've almost doubled that number, which is just incredible that there are so many people that not only played this game but wanted to solidify their legacy and create their fantasy aspect. So in some ways, the fact that we had branched out to do our own thing was one of the best things that ever happened to us. And that actually opened the door to working with independent wrestlers, because we weren't tied down to one brand and the regulations and the rules of that brand. So when I was able to show a product to these wrestlers backstage at wrestling shows, a lot of them were just like, hell yeah, you're not going to ask me to sign over my likeness. There are royalties involved. We do exclusive print runs. We work out different deals on a person-to-person basis. But the fact that they weren't tied to any ownership, which I'm sure that they get pretty often. People want exclusivity on merchandising deals. This was a big appeal to them, that it was an independent product that they could work with, and we just kind of grew. But more importantly, the community is what grown. And Scott will tell you, this community is so supportive and friendly and welcoming. I think a lot of that has to do with the ease of the game and the product. But if he wanted to sell some of his stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people would pick up things not only because they wanted to, but just because they would generally want to help somebody out if they needed it, which is always pretty awesome.
I think we see that often in the community. The Facebook community is really big, and somebody can go out and say, hey man, some stuff happened in my life and I need to sell my stuff. And then you hear crazy stories, and it's I don't mean this in a negative way. A lot of these guys rely on the SRG community as a family, because those people are there talking to them all the time. They're playing games. They're traveling to events with all the virus that cannot be named stuff. The community's still playing like crazy. I mean, almost every week there's 1 or 2 events going on. And if you're watching this for the first time and you're thinking, well, I kind of like pro wrestling, but I don't like Magic the Gathering or those type of collectible card games, you only need 30 cards. You only need 30 cards for a deck. It's a really unique process. Like Magic the Gathering, you have thousands of combos and you don't know your answers. In this game, you have 30 cards. It's really simple. And if number 1 is a punch, you can change your number 1 out for a different number 1. So every deck's going to be 1 through 30. Yeah, every deck's going to be 1 through 30. And here's the it doesn't matter how good you are, you have to roll a dice. And I've talked trash for months with one of Steve's play testers and I believe helper, Pat Mulligan. We had a feud going up into Chicago. We were going to have this big match. And at the time, there was a character named Merlin Van Berlin, the big German strongman who I worked into Scott Prime's background. He was sold out on the website, and Pat said, if you can beat me one-on-one, you get Merlin Van Berlin. And I was like, all right, buddy. And so we played it up. We trash talk online. We sat down, and I'm not kidding, 4 rolls in, Pat put the sticks to me, and it was over. And But that's the beauty of the game. I've been to not many big tournaments, but we had a gathering down in Texas. We had a create a character event at the Wizards Asylum, and some of your best players can go down in 10 turn rolls just because you have to roll a dice to have a turn. Now, your really control crazy Magic people will say that's the bad thing about it, but no, that's what's amazing. It's like watching pro wrestling. When my daughter can sit down and beat the best player at our store, that's what you want. That's why you watch Nitro back in the day. I mean, Dirk, you remember the night that we saw Rey Mysterio roll up Kevin Nash and win, and we were like, holy hell, what is WCW doing? They're actually going to start taking chances on guys.
Right.
That's what it feels like. And then
and that's why the game was designed. Not to cut you off, Scott, I apologize.
No, go for it.
I played this game raw deal, and it was such a strategic competitive game. It almost got to the point where it was like chess, and I felt like I would travel to these conventions and you would go with like 3 or 4 of your friends, and everybody else was like your mortal enemy. Because it was like one of those games where if you lost, you felt like you got outsmarted, so, and I knew with a game like that, if I wanted to teach you guys how to play, you'd never played, the learning curve would be so high that it'd probably take you 3 or 4 weeks before we could actually play a competitive game without me letting you win. So I wanted a game where I could show anybody with any background, and even though strategy will always win out, over time, anything can happen. I like the fact that I could teach somebody how to play in a demo, and then I could say, I'm not going to take it easy on you anymore, and they could actually beat me. And to me, that's the fun of the game, because I felt in a game like Raw Deal, you get so far along that, you feel like you couldn't lose. And there are other games like that have no variance, and I just didn't think that that's fitting for a hobby,
Yeah, I've heard many stories, Steve, about like you're at a convention or a con or at PAX, and somebody gets introduced to the game, and then they join the big tournament, and then they finish second, or something like that. That is amazing that you can have a game that can just. I mean, anybody can pick up at any time and have fun. And I will say, you saw the quote up there that Dirk put up there. Pat still gave me the competitor, probably because like he felt sorry for me. So I still got Merlin Van Berlin. Thank God, because I really wanted him at the time. So
I thought you were going to say you squashed Pat, because that's usually the outcome. But even a broken clock gets it right twice a day. So good job, Pat, on playing it forward and giving them the prize anyway. But that's the beauty of wrestling, and just like you said, is in wrestling, you could turn on a match and they have what's called a squash match, and it's just the guy comes out and he's like, kick, power bomb, hits his finishing move and pins him, and the match is over. And that happens. And I feel like that's as much as part of wrestling as it is in this game. So you could fall victim to that. And when you realize how rare that is in the game, the way the mechanic is, I feel like you're almost excited for it, even if you're on the receiving end, because it's hard to pull off. And it's like, oh my God, I went out there, I got squashed 3 turns, so it's part of the story of the game. And imagine that, like, we've had events where we had 100 people playing, and it came down to a finals of 2 people, and the guy lost in 3 turns. Like the reaction the crowd has to this live, just like a real wrestling match, people are stunned, they can't believe it, and it leaves you with a story that's almost bigger than when you had a match that went on for 45 minutes. So it's
what I find interesting about the community is like how many people are rooting for other people. I mean, it's like, because my approach is I don't really care about you. I care about my character and how he does in the game. And I care about the people who play Scott Prime. And I don't care about these other things, but you have other people like really rooting for like so-and-so to win and this other person to win. And I find it humorous at times. I'm not saying I'm better than them or anything like that, but I sit back sometimes and just kind of laugh to myself. But hey, if you're entertained and you're having fun, then go for it, man. I mean, that's what pro wrestling is about, right?
Right. Some of our players have almost taken on a persona of their SRG competitors, and people root for them and they root against them despite who they're playing. And, people are cheering them on. Hold the line, Harry, as we call him, Jonathan, who's in the chat. He's very loved by the community, and he was in the finals recently to create a character. And
yeah, I heard he won.
When I tell you he won, and when I tell you that the community was so wildly behind him, he was up against Kirk Polka, who's our underworld champion. You know, it's like our second biggest title that we have in the company, and Kirk Polka has the reputation of being a heel. In his last title defense, he used the shovel illegally, which if you're caught using the shovel, you get disqualified, but you keep the title, just like real wrestling. So the community was really frowning upon this, that he would do that, knowing that he could get himself disqualified like a real wrestler. But it's legal. That's part of the game. You know, as the champ, it's called the champion's advantage. So you have this guy who made himself probably the biggest heel in the company by using a shovel in this match, versus Hold the Line Harry, as we call it, babyface rookie, fresh out of Dragon Con, and he's up against him in the finals. You know, Kirk Polka, your champion, has about 6 characters in the game already. Harry doesn't have one. When I tell you the whole live audience digitally was behind Harry, it was incredible. And it was a squash, as we talked about before. He actually pulled off a combo, which he rolled a 12 in a main event match, which normally that would do nothing. The only time that does something that significant is a main event match. So he got to the main event. He did it. He hit the 1 in 6 chance, and people went absolutely crazy for it.
Yeah, it is a great environment. So if anybody's out there, I mean, I know we have other subjects to cover, but it's a great game you've got going, Steve. And I'm glad to see that every year that you do a Kickstarter and it's made your family more money. And, you know, I know it's not all about the money, but it's you're very blessed to do something you love.
It's partly about the money, folks. I mean, if you like something, you got to support it.
Well, exactly.
If you want to Dirk, that's perfectly said. I actually, a couple of years in a row, I got called in to do some speeches for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in a public school, and talk to them for a little bit. And that's the absolute truth. Like, I don't do this for the money. I always joke, if I want to be rich, I'd sell insurance or something like that. But when you have a hobby and you love it, you need to know that money is very vital for you to keep going. Now, that shouldn't be your driving force, but in the back of your head, you have to understand that everything you do needs to be that it's semi-sustainable and definitely profitable and able to keep yourself up and running. So I totally agree. It's not about the money, but you need to be aware that it is about the money to a certain extent.
Well, I'm going to toot Steve's horns for a second. Like, he's not lying when, like, tonight I could come over to your house, Dirk, and we could play a game and have a question, and we could probably text Steve through Facebook and get an answer within 10 minutes most of the time. And there's sometimes I'm sitting with my friends, and if I even ask a question, I'm like, he doesn't have to do this. He has his own life, but he's always there for us. And I've been around Steve where he's been at, he flew into Chaos Cup, a Blood Bowl tournament weekend, just to play Supershow with us one night and sell some stuff and hang out and have tournaments. And all night he was answering text messages between matches. And you want to support somebody like that. I know when I created Scott Prime, I wanted to be kind of this heel. I wanted to, old Ted DiBiase used to have that glove and he'd put something mysteriously in there and use it to hit people. Shawn remembers that. I wanted that. And I remember at the very first, when I proposed that to Steve, he's like, I don't know if people will like, a character that has a finishing move that could get them disqualified and lose. And I said, it's your game. You do what you want. I said, but I feel really strongly about it. And I remember it wasn't too much long after Scott Prime came out. Steve left it in, even after play testing. And I believe, Steve, you said something to the effect of, I'm glad I listened to you. It really worked out. And it just... He'll work with you, folks. If you want to make a character or answer questions, he's there. And, I approached it, though, in a way that I wasn't demanding. And Steve gave me, he didn't give me necessarily, he's not going to give you everything you want, is what I'm trying to say. It's his game. He has rules and he has to play test stuff. But if there's a way to do it, Steve's going to find a way. So,
and I appreciate that, because it's a vigorous process creating characters, and people think we show favoritism, and we really don't. Like, at the end of the day, the game has grown on such a competitive level that we have to take so many things into consideration. But if you come at me like Scott did, in the perfect way, and you're designing your character based on the flavor of your character and the backstory, that's the best language that I speak, because I know that you're not trying to get one over on me and try to make your character the best in the game. Like, for me, the character development is all about storytelling. So tell me about your character. Tell me about your backstory. Okay, this is your guy's backstory. Let's design cards based on that. And that's exactly what Scott and I did. And I think the loaded gut punch pretty much captures that dirty heel tactic. If you get away with it, it's probably the best card in the game. If you don't, you lose the match. So it's one of those things.
So what came first, the loaded glove of Scott Prime or the loaded gut punch? That's just a generic finisher for the wrestlers. Do you remember?
The gut punch, I think the Scott Prime might be the first one, or the trash can. It's either the trash can that gets you DQ'd, or Scott Prime was runner up. So one of those two.
I think I saw the trash can before the Scott Prime thing, but it was it was important to me to have my guy have something that seemed really decent if it worked, like a 1 out of 6 really awesome thing, and a 1 out of 6 like really bad, because I wanted to be the heel. I even told Steve when I said I don't need a great character. I just want to be a good mid-card heel. I want to be a better Iron Mike Sharp, if y'all remember that guy from old WWE,
And ironically, you've aged really well in the game. People say you're pretty damn good now, so that's awesome.
I know. I wish I could play my character as well as others, but I still root for him. I like to tell people, like, after Gen Con, like, oh, so my character is like part of the tag team champs of the world. Look at me. And they're like, You weren't there. And I was like, no, I was there. I was getting played.
Some people will play my character and they'll be like, I'm 6-0. I'm using the boss. And I'm like, you mind if I look at your deck list, man? Because you're doing it better than me.
You know Jacob Maynard well. He plays Scott Prime, I think, all the time, and me and him have many discussions, and I basically steal his deck list about every 6 months.
One of the smartest minds here in the game. Earlier, I was reading some of the notes that you guys talked about looking forward, and something you guys had mentioned earlier kind of sparked this in my head with Scott saying that I always try to serve the community. And I really have become, that's my main role here, as a servant to the Super Show and the SRG community. So while I have a vision and goals of a lot of the things that I would like to do, basically I'm at the hands of what the community wants. And I use my best judgment all the time. Obviously, I can't give everybody everything they want, but basically I get to see what people want to do, whether it's more creative characters or theme music or 3D printed items or different art styles, and I listen to the community as much as I can, and then I do my best with the resources that I've been given to bring those things to life. So
well, Steve, you've done a lot. I mean, we didn't even mention I know there's been big members of the community that's passed away, and you've kind of honored them once they passed away in forms of characters. I know that was it Matt Travis, the independent pro wrestler that we lost, where you had some sales that went on for him and his family. Is that correct?
This is correct. And again, this is all because we have such an amazing community, and I cannot credit, these are just ideas that we have. Sometimes they're from me, sometimes they're from the community. And, it's one thing to set up these fundraisers for people that need it and to do, community charities, for lack of a better term, to help people out in need. But the community really, really rises to the occasion. And, in instances like Matt Travis, where he was taken from the wrestling community, he was a member of House of Glory Wrestling that's done a ton of things for us over the years. We were able to raise a lot of money from him based on selling cards, and we matched all the donations, and we were able to link up with his mother, and it was a very beautiful, emotional time to be able to do that for somebody. So that was wonderful. And for me, that's one of the biggest rewards. Obviously being able to do this as a professional thing is wonderful, but for me to be able to reach out and help somebody, and show not only that what we were able to, but look how many people in this community support you and think about you and care about you, is a really, really nice feeling. We've had people get sick, and we do what we can. It's really, there's no other way to put it, is when somebody needs something, the people around you are the ones that are going to look to take care of you. And Scott mentioned it earlier, this has become a family to a lot of people. So that's why
I think
another reason that I answer all my messages. Maybe somebody sends me a message, you're just having a bad day and they just need somebody to say hello to. And I tell people, you can message me, say, hey, how are you? And I'll be like, hey, how are you? And that's it. If I'm busy, I'm going to tell you I'll talk to you later.
to show you what kind of family this has been. I think this person didn't realize how many people he was reaching out to. There was a member, Chris, in the community who is in New York when all this, disease we cannot talk about on YouTube started happening, and everybody was starting to get shut in. He went through a lot of stuff. He caught it. His mother caught it, and he was updating us every day. Day 1, we're here. Day 2, we're here, and it went like a roller coaster in some of the worst ways, because it was one day it was, hey, good news, mom's going to get off the ventilator, to just days later he let us know she passed away. Wow. And I bring this up not to like, I think it was a great thing that he did, because so many people were sitting at home, some people not knowing, like, should we take this serious or not? And this let them connect. And not only was he kind of like warning people, make sure you wash your hands, try to listen for just a little while, stuff like this, because it can hit you. He was also reaching out to his family. And I think everybody was there for him and got him through this. And it was weird. And yet at the same time, it just shows you how great of a community the SRG community is. Steve's building something that's really, really great. And I know it sounds like I'm trying to get him to, make out and marry me, but I'm not. I'm saying he's blessing a lot of people that he might not even realize, and through the family and community he's creating, and he's doing a really good job. And he should be proud. Every now and then he should look in that mirror and smile at himself and say, you're doing a good job. And I hope he knows that and believes that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Italian Bombada thing. Bombada is like a brother to me, and he came on hard times. And I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of people weren't taking this seriously. I don't know if I took this as seriously as I should have in the beginning, but that made it very real. And, more important than having a fantastic product, we have the most amazing community ever. The outreach that we had for the Bombada support, we put cards on sale that are kind of obsolete, and everything got donated to the Bombada, and they flew off the shelves. And people were sending me custom artwork that we had drawn professionally and made into artwork to deliver to him because we couldn't go see it. And gifts were coming in for him. And it was just absolutely amazing. And, Chris is one of the most generous human beings and the best people you can meet all around. The guy would take his shirt off his back for anybody. He has, he donated several characters to other players that he had paid for himself or won, and these things are not cheap. That when he was in the hospital, we actually, his most recent purchase, he had given away to someone. So we said, you know what, Chris, you're always charitable. I want you to have something to think about when you're in there. We want you to design a new character. And we rushed it, and we had it done and completed while he was still in the hospital. And they did a fundraiser for Chris too. And he was so, I cannot even tell you the difference between talking to him on day 1 and then when the community outreach went to him and day 2. He was like a totally different person. And I really believe that all the, not to sound cliche about it, but all the positivity and all the stuff people reaching out to him saying that you're going to get through this kind of really, really did help him and pull himself back up and get better. So, if that person is alone in the hospital at times, you don't know if it would be the same outcome.
Yeah, man. Let's see. What was I going to ask? Oh, Scott, you did some artwork for this thing.
I've done some. So Steve's recently in some of the packs have had some blank cards in there, and I recently just at home started doodling and stuff, drawing on them. I took a few commissions for some people, and me and Steve have been talking, and so I don't know I know my deal between me and Steve. I know I'm going to do some artwork on some blank cards and send them Steve's way. From there, who knows where we're going to go. Maybe all of us here are artists, so maybe we should talk to Steve at some point of some ranking studio people doing some artwork for him. But we can do that not on Taskforce Geek. If we can do that behind the scenes and stuff like that. But yeah, so I'm excited to work with the boss and do some artwork and then send it his way. And even if it's just the little fun blank card things, that's fine. What Steve wants to do with those is up to him once we're done.
So I do have a little plan. I'll tell you about it. I had another artist who I like. Name is Dave Cole, and he's done some like hand painted headshots. And I dream way big. So I think that like one day I'm gonna have a place to live of my own where I could hang up these paintings. And I was looking at them and like, you know what? If somebody was walking by like a museum, there wouldn't be like an identification underneath it. So I think having your little hand-drawn cards underneath it and then like a tag that says their name would be awesome for the eventual Super Show museum that we all know is going to exist one day. But I wanted to do like in tangent, have two versions of it and then just kind of see how it goes from there. That was my vision with it.
I think all I can say is I think seeds are planted, and I know I'm not back full time at my real job and I don't know if I'm going to be going back anytime soon. Still with everything going on, so seeds are planted. We'll keep watering this project, and we'll see where it goes.
So just to let you know a little bit what he did, he drew amazing little artworks for a guy Mark Perry who has supported us a lot and created a bunch of characters. Now, there's such a big difference between like the competitive landscape and my mentality. Like if I was playing in an event and Mark had those in his deck, I would be like, okay, cool. That's what his finish does. We know what it does. Let's play. Let's have a good time. But there are so many people that can't handle that sort of attitude when it comes to the competitive landscape. You know what I'm saying, Scott? It's like, you can't allow that. And I'll be like, what do you mean? They'll be like, the guy has to have sleeves on his deck. I'll be like, no, he doesn't. What do you mean he's got to have sleeves on his deck?
Yeah, I mean, I found out drawing these. I don't know if Dirk or Shawn, have you guys drawn trying to draw a full picture on like a 2.5 by 3.5 card?
Yeah, that's not easy.
It's not easy. That's
why they do like the half face or things like that.
So I was trying to do full wrestling pose. What's that?
Pimping ain't easy.
Yeah, pimping ain't easy. So it'd be interesting to one day try a real Super Show card art where I don't know what the real specs are, but I know I won't be drawing on a 2.5 by 3.5 inch card. So
when I started off, I didn't know anything about anything. I'm self-taught from Photoshop and all our printing and experience. So like artists would be like, what specs do you need? And I'd be like, a rectangle. I'll make it work. You send it to me, I'll crop it, I'll shrink it, I'll do what I have to do.
That's me. I'm always asking for specs.
Shawn is grimacing right now because he deals with that stuff every day.
Anyways, I know we went on a long tangent about Super Show, but there is so much to talk about. But that kind of wraps it up in a nutshell.
We spent so much time on the community, which is great. But listen, the game is a lot of fun. Anything you could do in wrestling, whether it's tag team, triple threat, fatal 4-way, 100-person over the top battle royal, steel cage, ring of fire, lumberjack match, any sort of thing like that, you can do in the game. And I'd say it's not wonky. It really captures the flavor and doesn't change the game around too much. So if you're a wrestling fan or just a fun game, something you can play at home with your families, go check it out. Can I plug the website here? Am I allowed to do like some shameless plugs?
We're going to do plugs at the end, Steve. We still got another subject to hit on.
All right, let's go.
Right, and I've actually been running your website, your Facebook page, and an additional group that Scott gave us under you during this entire segment.
Yeah, I gave him the community page early on, so.
So you are covered. We got one. Let's see. Oh, okay. Walt says, "Me too, Shawn. Me too." All right. So our next subject is, if I can get, oh wow, it's been one of those days. Rob Liefeld has a few things to say about the prospects of Deadpool 3. He says it could be years before all the stars align for a potential Deadpool 3. Speaking with comicbook.com for the site's Talking Shop series, Liefeld blamed Marvel for leaving the character hanging after the commercial success of Deadpool 2, one of the highest grossing R-rated movies in history. Quote from Liefeld, I blame Marvel. Blame Marvel that Deadpool 3 hasn't happened yet. They are the reason it isn't happening. Whatever conundrum or if it didn't fit into your master plan, just commission it, he says. Okay, commission it. He added, if Ryan is making Deadpool 3 right now, that's because Marvel hasn't allowed it to be yet. And that's all I'm saying. So I do have a lot of faith in that system. Dude, I have no idea. I'm not giving you the answers you want. I'm like, yeah. Look, if it happens, terrific. That's some brilliant commentary from Rob Liefeld, folks. So since Shawn didn't get to talk much in the last segment, I am going to him first.
Oh boy, this should be fun.
Okay. Let me start off by saying I've never met the man for more than 3 seconds at a time. I've been in his presence, I believe 3-4 times. And just from what I saw, he does not he's not coming over to my house for barbecue. He did not impress me at all with his personality. He was extremely egotistical, somewhat narcissistic, and not a friend to his fan base. He was kind of rude, and perhaps he was just having a bad day on this one particular occasion. I don't know. He might be a fantastic guy. I hope he is. He's got a lot of people around the world that like him, like his artwork, and likes his creativeness. But he doesn't impress me so far. And with that, him complaining about the MCU not, worshiping at the feet of Deadpool and getting on Deadpool 3 right diggity now. I'm sorry, Rob. There are bigger plans at work here. I believe Deadpool has been announced for Phase 5. I think I read somewhere. It's the internet, so of course it has to be true.
Take that with a grain of salt.
Right. So, I don't know, but they have announced that they are going to incorporate him. Ryan Reynolds is working with the studio and trying to maintain the integrity of the character and whatnot. So, they'll get to it when they get to it, and when he shows up, it'll be amazing, and everybody who watches it will be ecstatic.
Steve, I'm going to go to you next.
For Deadpool 3, I can't see it not happening. I think that, there are a lot of factors at play right now with this disease that we won't name, slowing down productions, and when you're going to start, picking your shots at what you're going to invest in, maybe even as the highest grossing rated R film of our time, maybe rated R films just don't do what the PG-13 films do. But I do know that the following for Deadpool fans is almost unparalleled. Maybe just because they're so in your face about it. We do these convention shows, and the amount of they have Deadpool parades because there are just so many people even dressed up as Deadpool, and there was so much hype behind both of those films. Which personally, I didn't really like either one of them. Maybe I just don't get Deadpool and the character, and the humor was there, and the stories were cool, but they were probably my least favorite of the Marvel movies. But despite that, they're just wildly popular, and I can't see a world where they don't capitalize on that, especially with a guy like Ryan Reynolds behind it. He's just insanely popular, and the fact that they have him and he's been so good at that character, for them to let it die after 2, I just can't see it happening. Maybe this is just something that they want to get people talking about, and when things settle back in the movie world, they'll put a little bit more effort into this and putting it forward. But overall, I just can't see them not doing a Deadpool 3. Would it bother me in the slightest? Absolutely not. I think the less of those movies, the better. That's just my personal opinion. But I just don't think it's realistic to think that this is the last we've seen of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool in some capacity.
Scott, what do you think?
I think maybe Rob Liefeld gets royalty checks because he wants another movie out pretty quick.
Right.
I know what Shawn is saying about all the things that he said about Rob Liefeld. I have a different approach. This is many years later. This was probably mid 2000s. I was at a comic book convention in Texas. Rob Liefeld was there signing autographs and doing sketches. If you're willing to stand in the line, he did them all for free. I have a sketch from Rob Liefeld because it was free.
That's awesome.
I wish I would have. I got the characters mixed up from his Youngblood stuff, so I said the wrong character's name, and then I realized it. But he was already halfway through the drawing, so I didn't say anything. I mean, there were head sketches and stuff, but the fact that he sat there and took his time and did that was really awesome. Now, my buddy who was standing with me was mad when Rob Liefeld decided to go take lunch in the middle of this and come back, but the guy has to eat, and he is. And I mean, like, whether a lot of people like him or not, he met success really early on. You know, like I remember his DC work on Hawk and Dove, and the guy was only 21. And it wasn't too many years later before Image was founded. And whether you bought the Youngblood books or anything like that, it started a big deal for comic creators. It gave the rights to the creators with all those guys at Image. And Dirk, you worked at a comic shop at the time. You couldn't keep enough Image books around.
Oh yeah, it was insane.
I mean, any Image, I think you told me it's one point that if it had an eye on it, the Image eye, when it first started, you ordered at least 100 copies for the shop. Is that true or something like that?
Probably true. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't remember the figure, but it was, we couldn't order enough. And I mean, some of the stuff they were pumping out at that time was great, and some of it was really substandard, and it was all selling. It didn't matter. And
right.
You had something like Cyberforce come out with a chromium cover or something that sold 1 trillion. You know, I mean, well, it's insane.
Early success is not an excuse to being a D-bag. And Shawn, you had a D-bag experience with Rob Liefeld, and I had actually a really good experience with him. So I wanted to hate him too, based off of other things I've heard and see him do. My problem is that, like, he leaves books all the time. He doesn't complete stuff. Whether you like his art or not is up to you. That's subjective, like all art is. But I guess he's really passionate about Deadpool. I think that's like, he's going to go, when he dies, it's going to be on his grave, the creator of Deadpool, because he's so proud of that one. And I think it's really, really, really special to the guy, honestly. And maybe he does get a royalty check. I don't know. Or maybe, you know, maybe he sells more stuff during the time that Deadpool's hot. I just think he's passionate and loves his own characters. I don't think there's a problem with that, but I don't know why you say all this stuff anyways. You should know, once the House of the Mouse took this over, I doubt we get a rated R Deadpool. I mean, they want to make plush Deadpool dolls. They want to make, you know, they want kids to like Deadpool. They want parents to love Deadpool, and they want you to see the movie 100 times and then watch the family Deadpool series on Disney Plus. So he needs to relax. I mean, they're smart. They want to make money. They know it's already a proven thing that they can make money from, and they know Ryan Reynolds wants to do it and loves it too. Relax.
But this is a really naive question. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Has any Deadpool movie that was rated R been produced since Disney has taken over Marvel?
No,
not at all.
Has Disney produced any rated R movies?
Many.
Throughout. Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you count Miramax stuff, then there's a lot of, I mean,
there was Miramax stuff,
probably
and there was
nothing with the Disney name.
There was also Touchstone that they did a lot of more adult, more mature content.
Almost like an umbrella of Disney, but they don't put like the Disney
and now
logo
Fox.
in front of you.
I mean, they're releasing Fox films now under the Fox banner, so those are also rated R. Right.
Without going any further, I almost wish they took all the mutant stuff, like the X-Men, the New Mutants, the Deadpools. I kind of wish they would just take it and put it in its own universe. I don't need the X-Men and Avengers. I don't have to have that to have good stories. You know, like, I'm okay with us spacing stuff out, but I don't know what they're going to do, and they're not asking me.
Yeah, I mean, knowing that with that, it could, maybe we're wrong. Maybe they're not going to do anything with it because Marvel is doing so well with Disney. Why would you want to tie something like Disney is wholesome more or less, and Deadpool's kind of the exact opposite of that. You're not going to have that for
Right.
sale in the Disney gift shop.
Bob Iger, who is the guy who runs Disney, has come out publicly and said that he's okay with doing a rated R Deadpool. And I think that ultimately that when you're talking about Hollywood, you're talking ultimately about money. And so if the money is there, then Disney's going to put out an R-rated superhero film. And obviously Ryan Reynolds is the guy who was born to play this role. It would be a real shame to wait another 5 or 10 years where he's going to age out of the role before you get him back in that costume again and let him do his thing. There's 100, jokes that he could make about working for Disney or transferring over to the MCU that basically write themselves at this point. I think we're going to see Deadpool in another film. As far as Rob Liefeld goes, I'm not a big fan of Rob Liefeld in general. I think that he's kind of inserting himself in a conversation where, I mean, frankly, he doesn't really matter all that much. And I think that he should just relax. It's going to be okay. This character is going to show up, whether it's Ryan Reynolds or it's something else. It's been proven that this character can make money, and that's the bottom line. Because Dirk Cooper said so.
I suspect what we'll probably get initially is going to be like a Ryan Reynolds cameo in the after credits scene. We're going to get a little blip here and there just to remind people that yes, he is now in the House of Mouse, and yes, he is going to be a part of the MCU. And then they'll probably give him his own deal where he will again break the fourth wall, referencing Disney and all the characters under their umbrella and whatnot.
Don't be surprised within 10 years if you do not see a little funny slapstick comedy Deadpool kids show. I mean, they're doing stuff like that with Harley Quinn now. I mean, like, it's coming. I'm telling you.
Oh yeah.
So
that's without.
But
I'll even say that it won't even be 10 years. I'll give you maybe 5. Top.
So, I mean, Dirk's probably right. He's probably just wanting to toot his own horn a little bit.
I mean, they're definitely not calling him up to see what he thinks about this subject.
Right, for sure.
They don't care.
Exactly.
No. And honestly, they shouldn't. Nothing against Rob Liefeld, but what are you to this character right now?
Right.
I mean, honestly, I got the very first, what was it? New Mutants 98, I believe, maybe 97, which was the first appearance of Deadpool. I think it was 98. Anyway, it was also the first appearance of Domino. It was the first appearance of a character called Gideon. And that character was nothing like what he is today. The character of Deadpool today is an influence of all the great writers and artists that have taken his base character and built on it. So he's not even the character that Rob Liefeld created anymore. So yeah, I'm sorry, Rob, but who are you? It doesn't matter. Now, with that said, none of my characters are on a major motion picture.
Yeah, man! Congratulations for having a worldwide hit with a character you created. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, no one can take that away from him.
No,
right.
No. Let's see. What was I going to do next? Well, is there anything? I don't know. I'm scatterbrained tonight, guys. Is there anything else that you want to? Oh, I know what I wanted to say. The X-Men stuff I think is going to come out in Phase 5. I really Phase 4 is a little. Let's say it's on the cushy side. I don't know if we're going to have any breakout hits. I could be wrong, but I think that they are going to be looking to putting the X-Men and Fantastic Four into the mix in Phase 5 to really inject some super excitement after this current round that we're in. That's my thought.
I've heard something similar that, following up on Thanos would be Doctor Doom, and that'd be a great, not only an amazing supervillain, but a good way to pull those other storylines in with them. So
I'm glad you mentioned Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is their version, the Marvel Universe version of Darth Vader. The fact that he's been done so poorly every time is really a crime. And if you do Doctor Doom correctly, he's a huge character that can be both a big adversary for the MCU and also an ally at times. He's what is it? He became Iron Man at some point. I don't remember what the phrase is.
I mean, Dr. Doom's whole issue is he doesn't feel like he's being a bad guy. He's helping us out and forcing us to do things his way that are the right ways to him,
Right,
So
which comports really good with Thanos, because Thanos felt the same way, is that he's not a bad guy. He's just helping out the universe.
Right, and that makes the most compelling villains. I watched there were YouTube videos breaking down Doctor Doom's origin stories, and as you said before, I didn't read many comics growing up, so a lot of the stuff that I got from the Marvel Universe was from TV shows or bad movies, so you almost didn't take it as seriously as you could. And then when you got to see what Doctor Doom was really like and how he came to be and what his mentality was and all the technological advances that he had made, the character was just so profound, and sort of like the Thanos character, where he felt like he was doing good. He didn't seem like a bad guy at times, and he was pushed into some crazy situations with his family. So I think if he's done right, he could be the next supervillain in ways that we haven't really seen on a cinematic platform like that since Thanos, like your Dark Vader with Star Wars. But now, this could be the one villain that I'm familiar with that they could do bigger than Thanos, and Thanos was done really, really well.
Yeah, totally.
Agreed.
I think personally, I think whenever they do the next phase, if they do incorporate Doom, he'll be more comparable to the Loki character, in which he's the bad guy, but he's kind of overarching all of the films and the tie-ins. The big bad guy, I hope, I still hope, I think would be even more massive. Not to suggest any big characters or hungry characters or anything, but I believe that he will not be the main Thanos bad guy. I think Doom would be kind of your basic, and that's a horrible way to describe him, the intermediate bad guy that's going to bridge all of the heroes together to face
Galactus.
I'm not saying that name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I could see that too. It'd be a good, like a great transitional character,
Right.
like bigger than Ultron if we continue with the Avengers reference. Yeah, and where it kind of all time, or even Loki too. That was a good reference where Loki was a good villain, and so was Ultron, but they were tied into this bigger picture, and
Right.
that's definitely something that would be awesome for that sort of, for me, that recipe where you have the buildup of storylines always makes a better film. Sometimes we introduce films and you get a character, and then by the end of the end of that movie, it's run its course. And I feel like those movies are never as good as something that's in 2 parts or 3 parts.
Right.
So I think that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. All right, guys, it is time for the Task Force Geek Mailbag. We got something in from one of our frequent contributors, so I'm going to read that now. It starts with esteemed host. I am writing in hopes of addressing your 3 most recent broadcasts. Episode 3 had a lively discussion of action movies. I cannot say I disagree with anything said, though I would submit Pee-wee's Big Adventure as a sleeper entry to the list. The chase scene was among the best in Hollywood, has provided the last half century, and you can eat crayons if you don't agree. Walt also seems like a guest that I would like to see again for the cast to discuss, among other topics, the golden age of 70s and 80s cartoons and the sad disappearance of Saturday mornings with Bugs Bunny.
Amen.
That is a good topic. That'd be good. And Walt is always welcome on the show. Episode 4 featured lengthy discussion of comic-based movies, a genre I am hoping will take a rest for a decade or so. We just talked about it a second ago. I fully understand most of these features print money, but it seems like the film industry is oversaturated with Captain This and Super That. If that's what keeps books on the shelves, so be it. Moreover, that Murph guy is a gem. Side note, Sassy's airtime, though increased, still felt limited.
More Sassy. That's Shawn's cat.
Shawn's cat is Sassy. We haven't seen Sassy this evening. Shawn,
No, she's wandered off now. So
Shawn's spectacle-less appearance in episode 5 was a surprising yet welcome change. I was very engaged with the subscription-based streaming service Talk and Mr. Alcorn's appearance to discuss the brick-and-mortar side of the comics and gaming industry. With awe-filled reverence, pump, P.S., more Sassy, and more Jim. Got a comment here.
the cat is on her own schedule, man. I can only do so much.
Also, PPS, he says, after a quiet re-entry to Facebook, a search for Hee-Haw revealed post-history content from both Walt and Jim. I guess they incorporate friends of friends somehow into results. At any rate, I give these incredible men a salute for their distinguished taste in American comedy. Shine on, you crazy diamonds.
That was a fabulous
How about
email.
that? How about that?
That was a beautiful, beautiful letter. Beautifully written.
That is hard to beat.
I don't know if it can be.
Any comments or questions?
None here. Keep them up.
All right. Yeah. Keep them coming, buddy.
I'm probably going to have to start eating crayons because I do not share his love of Pee-wee.
Ooh,
You don't think that's a great action film?
that'd be a great episode of Taskforce Geeks.
No.
Let's get that going, Shawn.
All right. So now we are going to go, what are you watching, reading, or playing right now? And we'll go to our guest first, which is Steve.
Man, what am I watching right now? I just actually finished The New Girl, which somebody recommended, which was actually really, really funny. It's an older show that was on Fox. And I definitely recommend it if you like that sort of comedy. Movie-wise, I've been rewatching Pirates of the Caribbean because I got Disney Plus, and I got up to the last one, and it's not on there yet, which is unfortunate. I've watched Pirates of the Caribbean more times than I could count. I read all the books. I read all the teen books. I read the children's books just for fun. So big super fan on that. But I'm at that crossroads where I just finished the series New Girl. I watched that with my wife. We have a newborn at home, so it's good like filler in the background. I don't have something to step up in the plate. Star Wars is definitely up there, being that I have Disney Plus as well. So if there's some suggestions, throw them out there. What am I playing? Obviously, Supershow the game. We do have the online events, which is always a blast. That's pretty much the only game I get to play ever, which is amazing. And what was the last one? What am I listening to?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Reading or listening to, whatever. It's all
reading.
Good.
I mean, I love Reddit. I read Reddit quite often. There's always some good gems in there. Basically, read as much as I can mobilely. Hardcover books. I used to read about 2-3 a month. Now, unfortunately, I don't read almost any of them. Listening, Pandora. Come on, you got to have Pandora when you work. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And my grandma's 90 and she works with me, so we try to make it like a nice environment for her. So we always have like Frank Sinatra radio or Louis Prima, and it's kind of cool to see her, singing and dancing like the good old days. Not really dancing because she's 90; she's not that mobile, but singing along definitely.
Good stuff. Scott, you're up next.
All right. I'm just going to promote, of course, Supershow. This is one of the old boxes from really early on. This
Signed by
one's
Mick
actually
Foley.
Yeah, signed by Mick Foley himself. Look at that.
Hey.
Nice.
So honestly, I've been pretty busy with life quite a bit lately, so I haven't really read a lot or watched a lot, but played some Super Show and stuff like that. So I'm kind of empty on this subject this week, but next week I'm sure I'll have many gems. Played some more Champions of Midgard recently, but I think I've already talked about that on the podcast before. So, anyways,
there you go. All right, Shawn, you're up.
I just finished a couple of movies the other day. Mute on Netflix.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
From the trailer, I thought it was going to be a bit more Blade Runner. Man, was I wrong! But it was a good movie. That was really entertaining. What was the other one?
That was directed by the guy who did Moon, who is the son of the rock star. I can't remember his name. He just died the other day.
Duncan Jones.
Duncan Jones, yes, who is the son of someone out there. Help me out.
Mr. Jones.
No, his name is not Jones.
Tom Jones? No.
I'll look it up. You guys keep talking. I'll look it up.
Ziggy Stardust?
We'll figure it out.
All right. Thank you.
Anyway, watch that. God bless. I watched something else. Clearly,
jogged my memory on all this stuff when you started talking about movies. It's like, all right, I did watch these recently.
Duncan Jones's father is David Bowie. Is that what you wanted?
That's what I wanted.
Otherwise, I haven't really been reading a whole lot lately. Just a lot of work trying to finish up some logos, trying to finish up some pinup stuff, and just doing artwork. That's pretty much all my life has been.
That's cool, man.
Doesn't sound bad though.
No, not bad. I'm kind of in the same boat. I've had a family issue that's kind of kept me from doing a lot of consuming stuff. But I will say, over the weekend I saw Scoob, which is not exactly geek friendly. No, I think that Scoob was actually much better than I expected, and it had a lot of elements of kind of that Hanna-Barbera group there with the
had Dynamite in it, didn't it?
Had Dynamite in it. And many others. They kind of raked the garden on some of those characters and made it a much more updated version of this thing, kind of more like a Lego movie type vibe. And it had some jokes that were aimed at an older crowd, and the animation was good. It actually had some legitimately funny moments. If you got kids or if you're young at heart, you might get a kick out of Scoob. So that's what
awesome. Awesome.
That was something I wanted to watch for sure. I don't know if you saw Sonic the Hedgehog as well. That was one of the ones I've watched pretty recently, and I really enjoyed it. Maybe just because I'm a giant kid at heart, and I kind of like seeing Sonic have a little depth to it. But I thought overall the action scenes were cool. The story was good. It had funny moments. So that would be, something I'd recommend. Would you put Scoob on that sort of playing field, or?
I have not seen the Sonic movie, but that's another one I wanted to see too.
Recommended.
Yeah, cool. That's
so
good.
I'll give you a quick rundown of movies that I watched during quarantine, because I try to watch movies with my grandparents, and we try to pick things that they would enjoy. Old Man with a Gun was excellent. I don't know if anybody's seen that. The Upside was an excellent movie as well. The Green Book, which apparently won some major awards. I didn't know that, but that movie was pretty awesome. And then I watched a film that a friend produced called Equal Standards. That was great. A movie that was really strange, which is a genre I usually don't watch, but it had great reviews, called comedy horror, called Harpoon. It was one of the weirdest, most bizarre things that I ever watched, but I couldn't stop thinking about it after it was over. So I'm not sure if that was a great film or not, but it's definitely interesting and has some cool twists and turns. If you like horror comedy, which I typically do not, I would say recommend it. It's gory, it's funny, and it's got some good,
what's
some
the
good
name of
twists
it
in it. Harpoon.
Harpoon. All right, cool. But
the others I mentioned were just great movies in general. So
cool. Well, our next subject is promo time. I'm going to stick with you. Tell us where to go and what to do.
So srguniverse.com is where you can get Super Show the game. There are box sets that give you everything you need for 2 players plus 2 additional competitors to choose from. I definitely recommend if you're interested in this game, try that out. It'll be money well spent. $25 gets you everything you need. We also have some cool special deals that you can get bundles if you want to dive right in. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Super Show the game. We also have a Super Show discussion group, which is about 700, maybe 800 fans, which is a lot of fun because they answer rules questions. They cut promos on each other. They book matches. They book events. So that's where you would head on over if you wanted to check anything. That's the best place to find us. More info, you can look on Kickstarter, look into some of our previous releases as well.
Yeah, cool. All right, Scott, you're up.
All right, I'm gonna once again bothdown.com. You can find me if you want to, listen about Blood Bowl. We've recently started, since we're all stuck in the house or not returning to work, we've been playing a lot of Blood Bowl online. And so this last week, we in our little leagues that we have through online play, we've actually started doing like commentary as other people play. So we've been trying that out just to kind of like experiment with weekly content. We've had great feedback for the weekly content. People are okay with the shorter shows once a week instead of like, once a month, because they're stuck at home too, or they just need something to take their mind off of everything. And, the world's a little crazy, and, and if you stay in your house too long, you become a little crazy. And so we're all just trying to get through this together. So bothdown.com.
Yeah, good stuff. Shawn, you're up.
Just working on the Ranking Studios. It's up, it's functioning, everything is working for the most part. I'm trying to build up the store right now to get some product for people to check out if they want to purchase anything and whatnot. So yeah.
All right, and I'm going to add to that we have a Facebook page that we're sharing some artwork. We've shared some stuff from Scott. We've shared some stuff from Shawn and some of my stuff on there. So if you guys want to see some of our artwork, please drop by facebook.com/Ranking Studios. In addition to, again, our website, rankingstudios.com, where we have more art and more fun things going on. And it's still not really finished, but there you go. That's what we got. You can also email us at taskforcegeek@gmail.com. Does anyone have anything that they want to add before we wrap this up?
I just wanted to thank Steve for coming on. I mean, we appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate
you guys.
Fun too.
Listen, I always enjoy a good conversation, podcast, anything to talk. Anything nerdy or hobbyist is always a pleasure for me. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to put together a platform where we could get together and talk about these things.
Cool, man. Thank you very much. And you're a great guest. You covered even the stuff that you weren't familiar with. You had a good comment on it. So awesome. And I have to admit, I'm interested in playing this game. I'm going to get together with Scott and see what it's about. It sounds like a lot of fun.
It is a blast, and I thought it would be funny too when you guys mentioned some of the topics. Like, I have such a unique standpoint, especially when it comes to Star Wars, being that I'm one of the like very small percentage that the only thing Star Wars I remember going to see in the movie theater as a kid, and I don't know which episode it was, but Yoda just went like crazy on somebody real quick, and then he picked up his little cane and went back. That's the only scene that stands out in my head. So
yeah, you're talking about the prequels.
That's Clone Wars, I think, or I don't know. Yeah, it could be the prequel.
That's where he faced off against Dooku. That was probably Clone Wars.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's my recollection of Star Wars, and then to see the phenomenon of everybody so upset by the Disney films, and like for me to go in as my first actual experience, because I just happened to go to Atlantic City for a Super Show event, and it was a movie that I was able to watch on TV, and I'm like, I actually kind of enjoyed that. I don't think it was as terrible as it was, but the diehards hated it. So I want to see how it unfolds when I get through the whole series.
Don't worry, Steve. When you're 46, they're going to come out with some movie and you're going to hate it like us. And you're going to be like, I'm like those old guys.
Yeah.
Walt says that was Attack of the Clones, to get that correct.
All right.
We've been corrected.
Did I not say Attack of the Clones?
Is that what you said? I thought.
Yeah, Shawn did. Shawn got it right.
All right, cool.
Don't
think.
ever
I
doubt
thought he
me.
said Clone War.
Well,
maybe you said
okay. I might have
fine.
said Clone War. I might have said Clone War.
So we doubt you.
Don't ever doubt me.
All right.
Don't ever
You win.
doubt.
You win. You win.
All right. Anything else you guys want to say before I wrap this up?
Yeah, I kind of do.
ahead, man.
I think the Ranking Studios family. I don't know if Dirk wants me to talk about this, but we lost a member of our parents this past week, and our condolences to your family, Dirk, and your mother, and you, and we loved your dad very much, and he was a good man, and I'm glad he's at peace. So I know this is kind of coming real at you people, but if you're going to come sit in the living room with us, sometimes you got to hear the bad stuff with all the good stuff. You know what I mean? So
I would like to extend the same condolences as Scott. This is the first I'm getting to meet you guys, but something like that is never easy. So condolences from the SRG family to you as well.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's that's kind of a downer.
It's not a downer. Your father was a great man who made us laugh. I'll never forget going to breakfast with him. This was 15 years ago, and I told him, don't tell Doris, which is your mother. I said, don't tell her what we're talking about, because we got pretty crass. And he goes, well, what am I going to tell her? And I said, just tell her we talked about math and directions. And your dad just cracked up. He said, math and directions. And I said, girls don't want to hear about that. They'll just blow it off and move on. And he just laughed and got a chuckle out of us. And he always would say that we're characters. And I love that about him. So
I got to say, the first thing I heard you guys talk about was real different from the last thing that we talked about.
Yeah,
we came full circle here.
Sure did.
That was testing the mic, Steve. Let's stop that.
Yeah, we definitely can't recount that. Scott, I appreciate you saying that about my dad. It's been kind of a difficult week, and we put off last week's episode due to my own issues with this situation. And anyway, I haven't even made the announcement on Facebook yet, so this may be a surprise to some people who are watching this episode. In any case, I really appreciate you saying that. And my dad was, if you could pick a word for my dad, it would definitely be, if you want to say this guy was a character, he certainly was that. He was definitely unique, and never met a stranger.
No.
I remember on one occasion we were traveling to Texas, and he told a waitress that we had driven to Texas from Guam.
That sounds like your father.
And that's just one of many stories. He was a character, and he really loved talking to people and getting to know people and stuff. And he would have enjoyed this broadcast that we're doing right now. He would have gotten a kick out of it.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there's nothing else that anyone wants to add, then I will take us home.
Take us home.
All right. Before we go, I want to mention that we're looking for guests for Taskforce Geek. If you're interested, please contact me at taskforcegeek@gmail.com. We're looking for a diverse crowd. It would be nice to have a woman on one of these episodes. Please, if you're a woman and you're interested in being on video, get in touch with us. You can also visit the Taskforce Geek Quora space. That's where we get all of the subjects for this. So definitely check that out. Thanks to everyone for watching this. Please leave a like or share wherever you see this. It makes a huge difference. For Scott, Shawn, and Steve, this is Dirk Cooper saying, dream hard.